Hello, I'm Tris, and on this episode we will be continuing with the Jubilee layout build. We need to get a platform onto the layout, so then I can then put the ballast on. And the platform will be made out of platform sides, so I'll be heading over to Tony's Trains of Rugby for this. It's situated at Hillmorton Locks, so you get to enjoy a nice walk along the canal, see the ducks, you get some great countryside views as well, which is really nice. So you can have a nice walk, there's a cafe there, you can eat some food, as well as go to a well-stocked shop where Tony will look after you and has great knowledge of products, which will keep you going within your model railway needs. I always enjoy going and having a nice walk and a little bit of food from the shop. So went into the shop and I picked up these Pico platform sides, and they're quite simple. They have a interlocking piece, so we can put as many bits together as you want and they'll lock together. I used some glue to stick these together when I did it, but as you can see, you've got tapered ends. They do give you some paper sheet, so then you can have bricks on the side or stones on the side, and you can make your choice on that. I decided that I'm going to be using plasticard on this, so I have a bit more of a 3D shape to it. But these fundamentally will get me what I want. I want to have an angle, and I can use plasticard to start creating some of the shape. Putting it together, again, simple. You got two holes and two pointy bits that pops inside. Pop some glue on, and it's together. Nice and simple. I like to use the Tamiya cement. It glues very, very well, and yeah, I like it. This one is a Tamiya extra thin cement, and it has a very fine nib on the end of it, which gives you a lot of control of where your glue's going, and this glue is very, very good. So put it together. I've got a central piece, which is a parallel bit with an angle each side. It's going to be a tiny platform. It's going to be like a halt type thing, and it's a small layout, so small platforms make sense. So I just try and make sure there's glue there, and I let it dry. Once it's dry, I'm going to use some of these Wills kits. I believe this is all by Pico, so it's all quite fitting to be used together, and it's a stone. And what I'm going to do is I line it up, and I'm going to make a mark underneath it to work out, well, what depth do I need to cut this at. I have a plan to paint up all the stones and put some washes in and try and make it look realistic. It's always something we endeavour to do with our model railways. But using a pen, I make a mark, a little line, which I'll then cut out afterwards. I go and do this for all of my strips that I do, and when it comes to the angles, I kind of work it out based on the gaps. It's quite straightforward once you start trying to do it. To explain it's always tricky, but you'll see what I get up to anyway. So cutting out all the strips, I'm using a Stanley blade. I do about 7 cuts in the end. Obviously it looks like less on here because you don't get to see it. But I then give a little twist, which to be honest I should have taken more cuts, because you actually kind of delaminate some of the end bits, so the bricks or the stones don't look as good. But we clean them up with a knife afterwards anyway. But the Wills plasticard, it is very thick. It's not easy to work with compared to some of the other plasticards I've used. It would be nice if they were a bit thinner, but it's what's out there, and I used it, so that was good. Making the angles for the ends, again, simple. It's a line. You can start mating things up. If you're not sure, you can make a template, and there's also the paper template that's on the inside. You could utilize that. So I just cut a line, made a line, cut it down there, and then that just sits in place. Again, using the I was going to say super glue. You could use super glue for all of this, but I'm using my Tamiya extra thin cement. We drop that in place. So I put a couple of bits on the surface. It looks like it evaporates away straight away. But I put it on there just to kind of get the surface kind of activating. And then I come in with the glue afterwards, and I just touch at a number of different points. So on the butting up side that will meet the other bits, I put that on. And because it's got a fine tip, I can drop it down exactly where I want to, which is really great. It's going to be important that this sticks well, because when I end up bending it, there's a chance it might spring off, and we don't want that after all our hard work, once we get to that stage. So sticking this on, give it time to dry. Don't rush on. Just go away, do something else for a bit, come back and do that. Again, trying to make sure that I've got glue in all the spots, just to make sure it really does hold on. And once that's done, we add on our extra stages. It's quite important that actually where they butt up, we push quite hard against it, so I don't have a really obvious edge. It's one thing I don't like about some of these bits. You don't have edges that line up so well. If I did a better job, maybe I could cut away at them and try and make some mating bricks as you go along there. But with some glue and pushing it against it, it kind of works out quite nicely in the end. And if I paint it well, it might even hide that as well. But I don't think anyone's going to be looking at my platform sides as much as the rest of the layout. So let's hope that this looks good and it doesn't draw attention to itself. That's always the plan. Now there's one last little piece. We put that in. We glue it in place. Again, like I said, butt it up to that edge. I give it a push with my finger, so I give it a good shove to try and make sure it really does get up close so we don't have a gap. Because I think for me, I'll always notice that gap. But if I do the best job that I can, then I won't notice it. So we'll go with that. With that on, I leave it to dry and we do both sides. Giving it a bend, nothing seems to spring apart when we look at it. That's nice, and I get a feel for what we're going to be doing on the layout. Get it back onto where the platform, the words platform are written. And we're going to get an idea for what we need to do. We're going to use some plastic card strip and cut them to length and then glue them in between, which you'll see in a second. Did notice that my bridge was getting in the way, so I peeled off one of the little supports at the ends. I'm not sure exactly the name of it. And I will be cutting some of that bridge back. I want to figure out also, when I put the coaches over the top, how close can I have this to the layout, and how much of a taper round do I need to have the wedged end of each platform, where they taper down. Actually, it works out, because it goes down, the coach clears. They're kind of those wedges coming down, but I'll still give them a bit of shape because it looks nice as well. I don't just want to have straight bits. This is the plastic card. This is 1mm plastic card. I did find actually it was a bit of a wedge to get into those slots, but with some glue on it softened off and you could wedge them in a little bit. I like the idea of having some, 0.8 plastic card. It would help with this. I got this stuff off eBay. You can get this from so many different places. A lot of model shops keep hold of plastic card there. I end up cutting a shape into a little chamfered top edge, just so then we can get it underneath where the platform top will be. You'll see when you do this yourself. So really these could have been a bit smaller, but I wanted to give them lots of strength. And all we do is you find that groove, it lines up with it, and you can push it in. Like I said, it's a little bit tight using this 1mm plastic card, and something thinner, or just run a file on the end of it, will be absolutely fine. Adding supporting sections into the platform area will be good for us. It will give rigidity to it in this stage, as well as later on when it goes under any forms of stress. Little triangles being built up on the insides of many things generally makes things stronger. So I just work my way across with this. I'm not too specific on lengths I'm using, I'm just finding something of a length, dropping it, seeing how it sits in there, and then just put a few drops of glue in there to hold it, because later, once it's all together and dry, I'll put some more bits of glue in just to make sure that we've got adhesion where we can have it. And as you can see, just gentle triangles, building them up, and that's it really. Then on the tapered ends, I use this part to help create the taper. So I pop my piece in, which is smaller, and I get a small clamp. I found these ages ago. I need to get some more of these. I've only got 2, but they're very, very useful. Very useful. You don't have to clamp on it hard, just gently, and it holds it in place. So next time I find some small clamps like this, pick up quite a few because I've used them a lot whilst building railways. As you can see here, it's obviously quite soft, so that gets it together. Using paper, we create a template which will allow us to mark out our plastic card, because I think doing it the other way would be difficult. So using a pencil or a pen, doesn't really matter. We get onto our plastic card and we mark it, which will then use a Stanley knife with a decent blade to trim it out. A couple of slices into the plastic card's always nice, and then you can just snap it off. Really nice to work with. Once we've done that, we lay it on top. I did have to do a bit of fettling with a file to make it nice, but once that was in place, we just simply glue it on. You will see that there are a few gaps, but we'll deal with that in a minute. But underneath, you've got little supports that I just drop bits of glue on and hold it by hand for a good few minutes until that goes dry and hard and it's good. Using some Tamiya putty, I kind of went in with the cracks, and to be honest, some of the cracks you don't have to worry about. Where the gaps were, I was a little bit more concerned about because I didn't want the next stage to be falling through it, which was actually quite a fun stage for me. So I just worked my way over. I'm not too neat about it because it doesn't matter if you have blemishes here and there, but that's now all sealed up and ready for the next stage. So we don't undo any of our great work, just wanted to check it before we put on our tarmac surface on the top. Seems to work. We'll even get our signal box out just to give us the look of what things are going to be. It's quite a small one, but it looks great. Using AK Terrain's asphalt paints, we paste it on like poly filler. Initially I did try and paint it, as you can see, and then I looked up how to use it and I realised, oh, this is different. So it goes on like wall filler, so you paste it on to a certain level and then you level it off to whatever you want it to be. So with my platform top, I could have had a thicker amount of the asphalt paints, and that by having a lower area, so I could use some 0.5 plastic art, but this would be fine. But as you can see, we just push this over the top and we get a nice flat surface, and then you leave it and you'll see it goes really shiny as it starts leveling off and going through the process of drying. And then you use a wet brush just to clean up any of the edges, but I was quite happy. I don't want to have perfect edges on the side. It kind of gives it a bit more depth. But you see this lovely shininess there and you think, oh no, is this going to look great? Is it going to be this glossy mess? But no, it works really well. So it's AK Terrains. I'm going to use that a lot. When it dries, it looks like this. It looks like actual tarmac, which I'm so pleased with. And the surface, when you rub it with your finger, you get this silvery effect here. I rubbed it too much there, as you can see. But giving it a little rough up, you get this sparkle. And when you have it on the layout, I was quite happy. And I wish I could go back now and do, well, my platform, my railway in the loft. But I've got this for the future. We must paint the stones now using various different colours. The prime colour will be the colour of the plastic. We will leave that. I mix up a number of different colours. I've got greys, I've got like some beigey colours and a brown, and just mess around with a few different mixes of paint, and we paint various stones, non-specific, no uniform shapes. We don't want anything uniform going on, not every third brick or anything like that. Just whatever one takes your fancy, you coat that one with some paint, and as you can see, we start adding in the different colours. So I end up doing browns, like kind of the yellowy colours. We've got greys. And once that's done, we're going to put a wash on it. And that's going to be the bit that kind of brings everything together. But this is quite an enjoyable process. You don't have to be accurate in anything. You can be a little bit messy when you're doing the stones. You don't have to get the whole of the stone. With that in place, I've got 3 washes. I've got a brown, a black, and a yellow wash. And I'm going to be non-specific again. And I'll pick some black bits on it. I'll then get some yellow, and then I'll put some browns in various places. And what you'll find is you start having a bit of variation to the end product, because we want to have this looking like it's not uniform. When you look at stone, there's no particular one colour that everything is. It's always a bit wishy-washy. So we work this over, and at the moment it doesn't look so good, but when this dries it will look great, because we're going to be adding a dry brush afterwards. So this is something actually I enjoyed the most. Initially thinking, is this going to look right? But I've seen other videos of people painting stones for bits on the side of mountains and that. Went for the same process with this, and as you can see here, we start blending all the colours together, making them work with each other. Whilst that's drying, I'm getting a grey, which has got a little bit of, I guess, beige mixed in with it, to start doing the platform edges. Started out with a first coat and then come along with a second coat to really get the colour nice. I want to just clean up those edges where you've seen that the tarmac stuff's gone on. It's got a little bit messy, and we'll just run the paintbrush over. Again, you don't have to be super tidy with it. I don't want to run over onto the tarmac bits, but if I miss bits which are on the slabs on the side, that's okay, because it's just simulating more real life things. You look at a lot of platforms, they're not perfect looking. There's lots of damage or various bits on sections of it. and we just run this over, and we're going to neaten this up again afterwards and just give it its final touches. Using some grey primer I decided to use for this, because when you use white never paints very nicely. I've not found a white yet that's enjoyable, so I use actually a very light grey, and you wouldn't be able to tell looking at it on the camera, to start doing that white edge, you know, when they start shouting away from the edge of the line, please, and you've got that nice white edge that's on the side of the platform. I did wonder, well, how am I going to paint this on, but I thought, let's go freehand, why not? I ended up doing 2 coats of this, and just take your time, don't rush it, because you'll end up getting white everywhere. And then where the cracks are, I use a black wash to just drop in on these edges, just to make them stand out a little bit more. It looks quite strong and prominent here, but actually once it dries, it kind of calms down. It just offers, I guess, a bit of shadow, a bit of, yeah, just a bit blending in. If I was to do a little bit more in this, maybe I'd get the airbrush out and we can kind of weather the tops of those slabs a bit more that are on the edge. But I think it'll be alright for what I'm doing. So just running the paintbrush along, just finish off that edge was pretty good. Now I'm going to do some dry brushing. I've actually already done quite a bit on this, but I wanted to demonstrate. Basically, put some on the brush, I dry it off as much as I can, and then I dust it over, and the tops of the bricks, well, the stone bricks, end up getting a little highlight of the beigey grey colours. And it ends up looking, well, for me, I think it looks really, really nice. And on the layout, it's going to look even nicer. Putting the signal box in place, I had been thinking for a long time about point rodding. Should I bother with it, or is no one going to care? Well, I care, and I just thought, let's have a go. I've got this kit, which I was going to use up in the layout in the loft, but I thought, let's use a few bits out of this. I won't need all of the stuff that comes in the kits. I just thought, use a couple of bits to put the gesture towards having some point rodding. I see some people have done it, and they've gone to town on it, and they do, well, an incredible job of replicating what happens in real life. But for me, I wanted to use a couple of the levers that pivot round, a few of the little connections, and just glue them in place. So we've got something that represents that, and it's something that I was really pleased with doing afterwards, but at the time, a bit fiddly and initially a bit intimidating. It's quite small, quite fiddly. I don't know what really needs to connect to what, but I could have used my engineering brain that I use for other things, which isn't normally model railways, to kind of figure out a rough mechanism where, well, if that pulls that way, then that will do that. And yeah, it worked out alright in the end. I'm sure I've done it wrong. There'll be many people complaining that I haven't done this correctly. Fine, thank you for letting me know in advance. Leave me a comment and let me know if you've played with point rodding before, because I found it quite fiddly, and I want to do a lot more my railway up in the loft, and yeah, that kind of, yeah, makes me question, should I even be doing it? So with that done, I'm going to ballast everything now. Well, the track, not everything. I'm using the fine ballast by Woodland Scenics, and the reason I'm using that is because it looks more like the real thing, whereas the normal, is it medium? Can't remember exactly. It's quite chunky, and yeah, I feel like it needs to be this finer stuff here. This is one of the grey blends, quite bright coloured, but we will be doing some weathering afterwards to kind of dial it back down, because it's kind of almost sandy coloured when you look at this, and we want to try and avoid that. So I lay it on the track. You can see how much I'm putting down. Arguably you should do a bit at a time, but for me, let's whack it all on, get the brush out and start working it on. The brush is about 1.5 inches wide, and yeah, it's like, what, 12mm thick, a little bit more, and we just kind of tamp it around. So we work it across backwards and forwards, giving a little tap down at the time just to pack it into the corners, and I just work my way around. There's no rush to this. Well, I am trying to get this ready for the club day that was coming up when I was doing this. Actually, at the time of now doing the voiceover for this, I've done the club day, and it was brilliant. I did enjoy doing that, but we'll talk about that on another episode. Speeding it up now, you can see what we're doing. It's really easy, really, really easy, and some people don't enjoy it, but I think maybe because, are they rushing it? Are you rushing it? Do you enjoy ballasting? Let me know below. Is ballasting something you enjoy, or hey, it's kind of like a Marmite thing? For me, I do enjoy doing it because it starts bringing the layout together. having all those points there. Try and be careful around the points though, don't do too much. And using some isopropyl or alcohol with water mixed together, we squirt it onto our area. I understand you can use some washing up liquid, I would say fairy liquid, but there's other brands available. And you mix that with some water, you squirt it on. And the whole point of this is so when you put the watered down PVA glue on, which is, I can make it like semi-skimmed milk, when you put that on, it allows it to seep in, otherwise it kind of sits on top and makes a ball, and then you have the ballast not drying properly. And using a pipette, I then apply it, which is a nice easy way of doing it, but you have to keep going backwards and forwards to your little pot which has all your watered down PVA glue in. But I have a jam jar at the standby for whenever I need to do this, for whether it's putting coal in a tender or doing this. Even some scenics I use to stick it down, but I water it down quite a lot, so I don't know, it's not a 50-50 mix, that would be way too gloopy. But yeah, using this, it works out really, really nicely. Some PVA glues are already quite watery, so you might not have to water them down too much. One area that I wanted to make sure was good was my good shed base that sits here. And before I go and put loads of glue on the track, I just want to make sure I can put this on and it will clear, well, what would be a wagon. And then using the glue, dropping in, actually that will hold this in place. I'm not even going to use any other glues to hold this down. It'll be purely using the glue from the pipette. Speeding it up, see, it's a lot of fun. The gluing bit's fun, but you need to make sure you get everywhere. And it's okay to go over some bits again, but actually if you make it swim, then you also have some other trouble of ballast kind of trying to wash away. So you just try and be mindful of where you're putting it, and that you're not going to end up missing bits, and then when you pick it up or when you hoover afterwards, which you will do, that loads of the ballast doesn't come away. So I did a reasonably good job. After this, I used some more sleeper grime and some browns that I have from Vallejo. I work my way over the centre of the track with the brown, just to simulate some of the dirt, and I try and get the top of the track as well. What I want to do is kind of make everything kind of come into one. Like, this looks like you've got dirty track and brand new ballast. That kind of doesn't really work, does it? So what I'm doing now is just using the airbrush and carefully covering the centre of the track and just giving it that little bit more of a look. After this, I used a brown wash, and I ran that over a number of the areas on the layout. So you did the paint, let that dry, and then the wash, it can go on quite thinly, so it's very thin itself, and we go and run it over and we do all the areas around it, and it ends up kind of blending everything together. I was kind of really happy with that. You can make these brown washes from like Citadel paints and everything, so Agrax, Earthshade, whichever one, or you can mix up a really thin brown paint which will come out really nicely. We're now doing the brown wash here, and I run it over the edges of where the ballast is, just to take that white, because it's still too different from the centre of it to the side, because it's all arguably going to get weathered and dirty over time. So I enjoyed doing that, and it just goes in and then it dries out, and you end up having a nice blend of things. I don't want to have paint everywhere, but I'd like it to go into the cracks of the ballast and to add a bit more kind of texture to the railway. We can't just have these block colours everywhere. One bit that I needed to do was I did some road repairs because I had too many big holes. I wasn't happy, so I've got some filler marks here. So using a lighter colour, because I just thought we need some variation on there, I'm using a lighter grey to work those areas and paint them, and then we're going to have some fun with it afterwards and add a little bit more texture or contour to the road. So I run the airbrush down the centre of the road. What you end up doing is creating kind of quite a nice look, like a bits of used road situation going on here, where you can see this little line down the middle of it. For me, I don't know, it felt important because I wanted to kind of highlight some of the cracks and blemishes and bits and bobs, and this allows me to do that. And going straight down the middle of the road kind of takes the eye to it a little bit more and gives you something nicer to look at. With that done and dry, I wanted to add some beige ballast to the goodshed area. You'll see that on the right hand side of it. There's obviously nothing here at the moment, and we're going to have the little lorries and trucks driving onto here. So I wanted to have a different colour so it just doesn't all become one colour of ballast. So using a paintbrush and obviously some PVA glue that I put on there, I create a base layer to put this on. I only want it to be thin. I don't want it to have a thick texture like on the where the track is. So work my way around very carefully. Try not to get it over the wrong places, and we just create a smooth layer for it to fit on. And we'll show you in a second using the brush. We can make it nice and flat, and then when we hoover off the excess, then it should look quite nice. So I just take my time, make sure I get it into the nooks and crannies where I do want it. So where that little barrow bridge is, or where the cars are going to drive over, we haven't got holes. So I gently scatter this on. The containers are quite good at getting it on. I go on slightly thicker than I need to, but I am going to compress it down. So I don't want to have a thin amount, and then I'll have trouble where glue's coming through, getting onto the brush, and you end up having a complete nightmare there trying to do it. But as you can see, this beige colour is a different colour to the ballast, so we end up having a different look, which is great. Then using the brush, I tamp it down, so I just make sure I don't move it around so then the glue comes through and creates balls of ballast, but tapping it down seems to work and makes it work out really, really nicely. So that's something that you can focus on doing yourself. I did it on my layout upstairs with the same colour, and it worked out nicely. And once it's dry, just hoover it, and it looks quite flat and works nicely with having the lorries come to pick up any goods. With that done, we'll put the platform back in place. We can see our nice tarmac top and our painted stone. For me, I'm pleased. We're going to add a waiting room that we made on a number of episodes ago. It's 3D printed. I painted one up. I made one for Andy Hudson and Richard at New Junction. This is my 00 gauge size one. But I'm really pleased with this. It looks smart. We're going to add some more bits to the platform at another stage, not for this episode. I have done a bit more work to this bridge. After some advice from Andy Sugden, who's been fantastic at offering me bits of advice here and there when I'm struggling with bits and bobs, we added a back part to this to give a bit more depth to the bridge. I do need to add an arch on these kind of bridgeways that go through, well, the brick walls that go through, not bridgeways, and they'll end up kind of adding a little bit of darkness in the area, so when it goes through it looks good. I will be actually slicing the supporting walls that come forwards in half. This will allow for more room for the engine shed, just up here, and then obviously on the other side the same kind of thing, and that hopefully will look good. And yeah, I need to paint it. I'm not sure what I'm going to do exactly with that, but fine. I want to say a huge thank you to my channel members and my patrons. Your support has been incredible over the past couple of years whilst doing this channel. If you did like the video, please hit like and subscribe if you would like to see a bit more of this. You might not want to miss out on the coming episodes that come. And then leave me a comment below. Let me know what you think of what I've been up to so far, what you'd like to know, and anything that you'd like to see in coming videos. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. You take care, look after yourselves, and enjoy your model railways. Don't forget to have some fun whilst doing it too. Bye bye.